Hi, everyone, and thanks for being with me on the Tony Tompkins Show. As a regular activity these days, we're going to do a weekly podcast with Dee and Michelle. We did one last week. It was a rip-roaring success. Had 43 people, I think, viewed it. So can't get any better than that. But hopefully over time, we will become a little bit more popular. So there's some interesting things to talk about today, aren't there?
There are. I think they have a common theme. I was thinking that there are 3 stories that I woke up hearing about on the news this morning. What I didn't hear about was the common theme amongst all of them, which for me is male violence. So if I just...
Oh, Don't worry about me. Shall I leave the room and come back later? And you can just have your rant about male violence while the male's not in the room.
Yeah, hashtag, not all males.
Not all males.
And certainly not you, because you are a pacifist anyway. But so the 3 stories that I woke up hearing was the Israel-Iran catastrophe that's going on, the Bondi Junction stabbing on the weekend, which I know you've done a video on already, and we've just spent scintillating 2 hours.
How long was
that? We're never going to get back. I think it was more than 2 hours. Listening to Justice Lee give a pronouncement on the Bruce Lehman
ruling.
Ruling. Is that it? Is that the correct
I don't know
thing?
if it's a pronouncement. He was doing a lot of announcing.
He was doing lots of rulings.
He was.
Yeah. So for me, the common theme in all of those is male violence, even though we go from country to country to a shopping centre down to the micro level of rape.
Yeah.
Anyway, sorry, you go on. Is that what you wanted to talk about?
Well, I'm just trying to think of if that's what we talked about initially that we were going to talk about. And we don't have notes here today, so last week we did. So hopefully we can just be coherent and sort of linear, perhaps, in our discussion. But certainly, do you want to start with I think the Bruce Lehman things, because that's really hot now, isn't it?
Should we start at that end, at the micro level?
Yeah, well, I don't know how micro it is, given that there are so many people logged on just to watch this bloody
That was funny, wasn't it? Because we logged on early, I think it was about 9:15 our time.
Yeah.
And then the sound went out, so we started listening, and then it all disappeared.
And I thought it was my phone.
Me too, and I thought, what was going on?
But apparently they had audio problems, so he cancelled it for a bit. Half an hour later, he came back on.
Anyway, the lesson to learn from that, unless you really, really like listening to judges, just wait until the conclusion, which might be a couple of hours later, or wait for the ABC or the Guardian to write up the story. That was my conclusion.
I think the conclusion is there's this thing called the Ben Robert Smith stuff up. I don't know what you call it, but it is about, as we talked about once before, I think, these people get so upset and distressed that the issues that have caught the media's attention becomes all about them.
Yes.
And therefore they think, oh, well, we must sue the media for making it about us, when that's all we wanted in the first place, or we want our names cleared. But that didn't happen with Lehman, though, today, don't you think?
Well, it was interesting because there's a couple of statements I really liked. I just looked at the ABC website, and the headline I thought summed up that 2.5 hours that we just listened to, and that the headline was something like, Bruce Lehman found guilty of rape, even though he's not a convicted rapist, because that's a civil case. But Bruce Lehman found guilty of rape, defamation case failed.
So that was the ABC?
That's the headline for an ABC article, which then talks more about that conclusion, the findings that in terms of Justice Lee found that there was sex took place in Parliament House on the 22nd of March 2019. I think that was the date.
And it wasn't consensual.
And it wasn't consensual.
No.
And I think the important point, which many women may actually well relate to, is that Bruce Lehman didn't care about consent. He was just determined to have sex with this woman that he seemed to have gotten drunk and was attracted to.
And I think
he didn't care about.
And I think it made an interesting point over and over again about the fact that Bruce Leeman had a girlfriend who was waiting for him.
Oh, and made
that kept on calling. Kept on calling.
Oh, and he called Sir Justice Lee, who was quite witty on some
No, I
of
thought he
his.
was quite humorous, actually. Maybe a
He called him
comedian.
a
He
cad.
Yeah, called him a cad.
Well, I don't know whether
It's
he called
classic.
him a cad or he said he behaved like a cad.
Behaved like it.
He behaved dishonourably because of the way he disregarded the girlfriend at home. So he behaved dishonourably. He often lied deliberately. Yeah, I don't think he was a fan.
I think he kind of referred to him as a liar.
Yes.
Whereas I just thought he said that there were things about Brittany Higgins' testimony that were just inconsistent.
Yes.
But he did have a great understanding, I thought, of what it was like to be a woman and to experience rape, and how, even going to the media and talking to them about it, or going to the police rather, talking to them about
hesitation about that,
and the cognitive dissonance that would occur because you're so confused and you just don't understand what's happening, particularly when you're intoxicated. I was interested with the fact that he referred to them as drunk, not intoxicated. He didn't use the word intoxicated once. He just said that they were drunk.
You'd have to go and read through all those 384 pages to verify that.
I think my which I of course will do. I think one of the things that he could have said was that they were pissed and be done with it.
Yeah, he was very. You're right. He went through all of that, and he also at least went back to old definitions of rape, where it was about force and it was outside of marriage, and how that had changed to be included in marriage, and how contemporary ideas of rape include the idea of consent. So whereas, and he's only 23. He was only 23 at the time, Bruce Leeman. So he's missed something in the culture about how to treat women respectfully.
Well, it's like a lot of men.
And we won't mention the fact that it was might have been because he was a Queenslander, but anyway.
The issue, I guess, is that I thought it was great that he highlighted exactly what a woman's experience is like, given he's a male.
Yeah.
And he understood those perspectives. Clearly, I don't know whether he'd done a lot of research around that or whether he
did.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but he actually, because I'm an academic, I probably noticed that, because he said that there's a lot of academic evidence to talk about what a woman's experience or a victim's experience is when they're being violated.
Yeah.
And that neither side referred to that academic evidence. So he did that as a part of his own. Well, he probably had somebody do it for him, but.
Yeah, he's got staff. I thought the whole overall...
But that was good.
The overall, it's boring legal shit, I guess. He could have done the one-page summary.
He let us know, I'm going to go for 2 hours, just come back for the last half hour.
Yeah, he could have. But he was good, he was funny.
He was good.
He... and I thought I really...
That's an unfair criticism, really. That's his
that's his job. That's why he gets paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. An opportunity to look at the court system and judges in particular. And, like what we see often is, the televised, the dramatised version that you get on television of court cases. You don't actually get to see the lengthy sort of judgments that... Well, there will be one in relation to Donald Trump coming up in the next couple of weeks, but nevertheless, you don't often see that, not in Australia anyway. In America, they have more of those.
Well, often the focus is on the lawyers, isn't it, rather than on the judge's decision and reasonings, or what did he call it? Did he call it reasoning? His
summation? No, that's not what the word he used.
I think he called it reasonings that he was thinking through. Yeah.
And it was really clear that this is a civil case, not a criminal case.
Yes.
And as a result of that, there's not going to be any findings in relation to criminality.
No.
But he did. He did, funnily enough.
On the balance of probability.
So everybody's going to be saying now that Leeman is I guess you still have to say he's an alleged rapist, don't you? Because...
on the balance of probabilities, he's a rapist.
Yeah.
But he's not a convicted rapist.
No, it's a bit like Ben Roberts-Smith being a murderer on the basis
on the balance of probabilities. Yes, but he's not a convicted murderer either. Okay. And I guess we have to be careful about that. I get the other two things that were important from my point of view was that Channel 10 and the lawyer representing Channel 10 got a bit of a hammering over Lisa Wilkinson giving a speech. She said she didn't have to say what she did at that speech, which disrupted the criminal trial. So she could have just said, as he said, she could have just said thank you or something, anodyne. She didn't have to bang on, as apparently she did. I haven't listened to it. But he was all but Lisa Wilkinson, to her credit, had gone through and checked with lawyers at Channel 10 about whether that was okay, and she had gotten the okay. So the lawyer was also reprimanded. And there's some questioning about Brittany Higgins to be not around the rape allegation, but the story of Parliament House or the doing a cover-up afterwards. So there's so he was critical of her for that.
I thought he could have been. I would like to have been more critical of Reynolds, but he kind of left. I think he left the political stuff aside.
It's probably
that
wise.
probably wasn't all that. Probably wasn't all that relevant, really.
No,
but nevertheless, there's
and that might. Maybe, sorry to interrupt, maybe that would be because that's also subject to a current defamation case.
Yeah,
maybe that's why he couldn't do that.
Good point. Glad to know your legal eye is focused on that very fact. Yeah, wow.
Yeah.
So you're a doctor in law.
Philosophy.
Oh, damn. They're a bit different.
Yes. Anyway, so did you think that was a good outcome?
I thought it was... was it? No, the question really should be, was it an outcome I would have liked? Because it did mention $20,000 as being a amount of money that could be paid to Lehman. But is it about the dollars, or is it about at least identifying that what happened to Brittany Higgins on the balance of probability did happen?
Yes, so that's validating for her.
Because the issue really was about Channel 10 and Wilkinson and so on. So, but for us, I mean, who gives a shit about Channel 10? Really, who gives a shit about Wilkinson? I mean, Channel 7, Channel 10, Channel 9, they're all terrible. And the Liberal Party,
evidence of that.
The Liberal Party network, which I hasten to add on which is Sky News, they're all terrible, right? And they go out looking for bits of news that are going to be clickbait and that are going to be topical and that sort of stuff. And Wilkinson clearly was going to use the presentation at the Logies. So Logies?
Yeah, good question. I don't know
wherever
it was
that
the
presentation
or the Logies. I don't.
And she was
don't care enough.
No, and she was. It was planned. She was going to give this talk about Brittany and what had happened, and she was. I guess she was kind of conflicted in a way because she probably, as the judge said, you just should have said no. You're not doing it.
Yeah,
let's just not do it.
And Lehman shouldn't have put that case forward. What the judge did say about that? Do you remember that? He said he went out of the lion's den and then went back for
the hat. Yeah, great line. Great line.
Great line. So
in a lion's den.
So I think people, if they're thinking about defamation, no matter how much money they've got,
step back and don't do anything.
Don't, because maybe your credibility is going to be completely shot.
Which is the case here, because the news. I'm guaranteed. Well, you already said the ABC had it already up.
On it.
Guardian will have it up by now.
Janet Albrechtsen will probably say the judge was wrong.
Well, Albrechtsen will probably say the judge is trans and therefore is wrong.
Who knows?
So who knows what she'll say. But yes, and then Sky News will come out with their, oh, God, I can't wait. I can't wait to hear what Murray... Anything. Maybe they'll just shut up like they did about...
I think that would be wise to not say anything.
Yeah.
Actually.
Yeah. So, do you want to talk about Saturday's event and the aftermath of the massacre or the shootings? I don't know, it was a massacre. Do we call it a massacre?
It was
what they refer to it as? Stabbing murders?
A mass stabbing.
Mass stabbing.
I think. So a mass killing, mass stabbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time on Saturday afternoon watching the news on the direct broadcast of that. It was a fairly shocking story, but I was also keenly aware of conversations that were happening on Twitter too about what was happening. And do you need to say briefly what was happening?
Well, for our many international viewers who probably already know anyway, so no, not really. There was at a shopping centre in Sydney, a whole host of people were stabbed by a man who had mental wellbeing issues.
Yes, and at the present time, as far as I know, there are 6 people who have died, and there are a number of other people still in hospital, and they've released some of the names of people who have died. So the ongoing conversation around all of that I became aware of, particularly on Twitter, because that's where I spend
A lot of your
some
time.
of my time, was a couple of things. So, so by 7 p.m. on Saturday, we'd hit the world news. So there was a BBC story because I follow them. And maybe Irish news came first, Irish Times came first, but we'd hit the international headlines by 7 p.m. And then later on, there was the American news. So they were just kind of reporting what was going on. At that time, we did not know who the guilty person was. There were lots of images being flashed of victims. There were lots of conversation on Twitter about please don't do that if you have images that people don't necessarily want to know, their families won't necessarily know about this, so why are you flooding the internet with images? So that was one concern, that people were behaving unethically.
Yeah.
There were stories, so from the international stories, I should say 2 things. One is that there started to be a couple of female broadcasters from England started talking about, on the one hand, how this was an Islamist attack, because that's a bit of a theme in London at the moment. And somebody else was saying it was an intifada, which, as I understand it, is a Palestinian uprising against Jewish people. So they were making those claims, 7 o'clock on Saturday evening, our time. We didn't even know who the person was.
No, zero information.
Zero.
Zero.
I know. And there's the story that came subsequently, more yesterday, from the United States, the people there listening to it, was, hey, you Aussies, you need to get guns. Whereas most of the Australians were saying, thank God he just had a knife and he didn't have
He would have
a
killed
big rifle or
30 people maybe if he had a gun. But I guess one of the questions to you is why do you think people then want to go to a place which I guess encases or encapsulates their general beliefs about terrorism based on no information whatsoever?
I am not a psychologist. I have no
Theologically, can you tell me?
Theologically or philosophically. Humanly, I just think they're craving for attention, and they're just after those clickbaits that you mentioned before. Or they're so determined. I don't know how anybody could be so determined that they're right, that they could make an outrageous statement like that, because it was proven to be wrong. It's some Anglo guy from Queensland. That's the common denominator. Some Anglo guy from Queensland.
Where the rednecks live.
No. I'm not going to cast any aspersions on Queensland. But anyway, he was a Queenslander, recently arrived in Sydney, from what I can tell, Anglo.
So he was an immigrant.
Oh, yeah.
He's an immigrant from Queensland. Yeah. We should ban all household knives.
But it comes on the back of those discussions about migrants that we've been having, and migrants who committed crimes and should be locked up forever. So it seems to be about that raising fear of people in the community who come from a migrant background, even though it wasn't immediate. But
because he looked in the photographs as if he could have been Pakistani or Afghan or whatever.
We didn't see much really.
No. That's the whole point.
Yeah.
That's the whole point.
So from people go beard, Arab, terrorist.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not really good logical thinking.
And the parents of, it's a bit like they did some surveys. Psychologists did they did some surveys about the way people respond. So when it comes to something like mass murders, such as this, then it's really about, what is the social construct that first kicks in? What is it that we're thinking immediately? And at some point unconscious, and that sort of races to the front of our minds, and we think, oh, yeah, right, they look Arabic. So the first thing we think of is terrorism. And
that perhaps goes back to 9/11 and that whole, if you remember that, we had years of anti-Muslim, anti-Arab sentiment in Australia as a result of 9/11, and people had conveniently forgotten about the terrorists who were Irish.
So out of the Bondi Junction thing, though, has come, or a developing conversation, I should say, about mental well-being And I hope a conversation comes from that as to better treatment methods for people that have got mental wellbeing problems. I was quite impressed with Paul Murray last night, another one of my most favourite people. Anyway, he wasn't prepared to light the flame around blaming anybody for what had happened. He had a couple of people on it talking. I don't think either of them were qualified and steady, but they were talking about mental wellbeing issues and stuff. And I think that's a reasonable place to start.
If it was a person killing gay people, then we would have said he was homophobic. But from what we can tell so far, and we don't have all of the information, it's a man focusing on killing women, even though there was
So
a
it could be
man killed.
misogynist.
So it could be misogynist. So when people say it's not political or it's not ideological, well, actually, perhaps it is.
But we don't. But this is my point. But we don't know.
We don't know yet.
You know, we can see that's drawing a straw or whatever it is you draw, and it's
That's me drawing that link about male violence between these
because that's where
three
your subconscious sits.
Yeah. And would I have
Yeah.
been wrong in saying I bet it's a bloke? 95% of mass killings
Oh,
are
you're feeling
committed by men.
you're feeling good about that, are you? That
I'm feeling good about that. Well, I think that
thank God it's a man that did it.
Oh, and I'm not even saying it's a male's fault. It's a culture that encourages male violence, which we can see in the situation with Israel and Iran.
All right, now there's a segue. Dee has been just chafing at the bit to use,
Now,
haven't
you know that situation more than I do. Really, what I want to say about Israel and Iran is Israel said have justified their attacks on Gaza through Hamas attacking them first. But then when it comes to them bombing an Iranian consulate and then Iran retaliating, they don't sort of see it in the same sort of light. So again, there's sort of something missing in the logic of all of that.
Well, I guess, well, number one, Gaza seems to go back on the back burner. So you wonder whether they're doing it just
strategically.
to get rid of this, to put Gaza,
Take the attention
so we can
off
ignore Gaza for a bit,
Yes,
because there's going to be this international furor about what's happening in the Middle East generally. So that's number one point. Number two is they shouldn't have bombed this embassy that they say had Hamas people in it or whatever. They should just let it alone. They've captured these people. They treat them badly. They lock them up. The West doesn't do anything about it or make any comment because it's Israel for whatever reason. And then suddenly those people explode, do terrible things, and then the other side, which is the more powerful side, attacks back. You know, it's a bit like, just thought of this, brilliant idea.
Yeah.
Yep, waiting for it.
Yeah.
I've forgotten it. No, it was about in domestic violence. You know, the woman, and I've had guys tell me
The woman
this,
yells at the man.
and she follows me around, you know, and she just wants to know an answer, and she keeps at me, and she wants to know the answer.
She nags me.
Nags, you know. And then he fights, he punches back. So, and this is what happens in politics. I reckon in these sort of conflicts, the most the powerless one, the woman, often pushes back as best as they can, and when they push back too much, the other side beats the shit out of them.
Well,
Do you think that's a reasonable analogy, or
it is, and you haven't gone away from my theme of male violence being the common theme between all of those three stories as
exactly.
well. Because I guess the other thing that I wanted to say about Israel and Iran is that all the missiles are phallic symbols. Why are they shaped in that particular way? It's a bit like the Washington Memorial.
well, I guess a lot of it has to do with being aerodynamically designed.
Is that what it is? It's not just men showing off.
No. Bullets,
Silly me.
bullets are shaped that way.
Silly.
Rockets are shaped that way.
And is there a reason why bullets are shaped that way?
Well, because they're not.
I don't know. Could there have been another way to shape them? But it is really It's like these men, and most of them are men, have just never grown up.
Yeah. And they don't. I reckon one of the issues is too that, and I don't know how to frame this appropriately, but they've never learned how to manage conflict. There are thousands of people out there who work with the United Nations and work with
Yes.
foreign affairs
Yes.
departments who understand how to manage conflict.
Yes.
And if there's anybody out there who wishes to employ somebody for conflict resolution,
Yes.
please give Dee a call. It's back to our analogy
No.
about men who don't accept the fact that their behaviour is inappropriate will never change their behaviour. Look, if you really like our chat and you're watching us on YouTube, please subscribe, ring the bell for further notifications, and we'll catch up with you next time. And just take care, look after yourselves, and as we've just been saying, be safe.